So, picture this. A humid July evening in New York City, and there I am, supposedly buried under a mountain of paperwork at the office. But let's be real, that was a load of bull. I was actually trying to catch a few more glimpses of Alex, the new designer whose charm was the talk of the office. Can you blame me? The guy was like a walking, talking charisma bomb. Fast forward to 2 days later. Our boss decides we need some team bonding or whatever, so he sends us to one of those escape rooms. Guess who I get paired with? Yep, Alex. Talk about fate, right? There we were, crammed together, trying to solve puzzles. And let me tell you, the sparks? They weren't just from the static in the air. There was something real brewing between us. The next week, I'm spinning this yarn to my husband about a girls' night out. Total fabrication. Instead, I'm meeting Alex at this dimly lit jazz bar downtown. It was one of those nights, you know? All laughs, whispers, and the kind of attention that makes you feel like you're the only two people in the world. As things with Alex started heating up, I found myself weaving more intricate tales to cover up our trysts. Work trips, late-night projects, my creativity knew no bounds. Our secret meetups at various hidden spots around the city felt thrilling, but with each lie, I could feel myself getting in deeper. About a month in, Alex pulls out all the stops and whisks me away to this secluded cabin in the Catskills for the weekend. Talk about being swept off your feet. It was like we were in our own little world, away from reality and its pesky consequences. Coming back home was rough. My husband had left this bouquet of my favorite flowers with a note about how much he missed me. Guilt hit me like a truck. But did I stop? Nope. I convinced myself we were just in a bit of a slump, nothing more. Then comes Alex's birthday. I decide to throw him a surprise bash at his place. I was juggling invites, making damn sure no one from our work circle who knew my hubby would catch wind of it. Playing both sides was getting exhausting, but somehow, I kept the show going. Let me tell you, keeping up this double life? It's no joke. Every whispered conversation with Alex, every lie to my husband, it was like I was digging myself deeper into this hole. But in those moments, caught up in the rush, none of that mattered. All I could think about was the next stolen moment with Alex, consequences be damned. Alright, buckle up because this chapter's a doozy. Imagine this. The surprise party for Alex was off the charts. The vibe was electric. Everyone was having the time of their lives, and for a hot minute, I forgot about the tightrope I was walking. But, as luck would have it, amidst the chaos, one of our eagle-eyed colleagues snapped a pic that caught me and Alex in, let's just say, a less than professional pose. Before I could even think to intercept, boom, it was all over social media. Cue the world's worst wake-up call the next morning. My husband, holding up his phone with that photo front and center, his face a mix of confusion, hurt, and disbelief. Is this what your girls' nights out are about? He asked, voice cold as ice. I scrambled, trying to play it off as a drunken slip-up, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. Our trust was in shambles. So, I did the only thing I thought could salvage the wreckage of my marriage. I broke things off with Alex. Told him we'd been playing with fire and got burned. He couldn't believe it, couldn't fathom why I'd cling to a marriage that was clearly on the rocks. But ending it with Alex felt like the first right decision I'd made in months. My husband, still reeling from the betrayal, laid down an ultimatum. Marriage counseling or bust. I agreed, clinging to a shred of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could bridge the chasm that had opened up between us. Spoiler alert. Those sessions were more like pouring salt in an open wound, with every accusation and defense laying bare just how far apart we'd drifted. As if that wasn't enough to deal with, a couple of months post-Alex, I stumbled upon messages between him and another colleague. Yeah, turns out, I wasn't special, just another notch in his designer belt. The sting of betrayal hit all over again, but this time it was mixed with a heavy dose of humiliation. Meanwhile, my husband, no longer the man I thought I knew, started playing a dangerous game of his own. He became distant, cold, pulling away both emotionally and financially. It was like I was living with a stranger, one who was hell-bent on making sure I felt every bit the outsider in my own home. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I discovered his masterstroke, a secret bank account, quietly draining our joint savings dry. It was a calculated move, a silent but screaming declaration of war. He was setting the stage, making damn sure that if I left, I'd leave with nothing but the clothes on my back. Talk about being caught between a rock and a hard place. Here I was, trying to navigate the fallout of my own actions, while simultaneously dodging the retaliatory strikes from the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Every step I took, every decision I made, it felt like I was just digging myself deeper into a hole with no way out. You know that moment when life slaps you in the face and says, "Wake up, you've made a mess." Yeah, that was me, staring down at divorce papers my husband had just thrown on the table. He documented everything. My lies, the affair with Alex, every sneaky move I thought I'd gotten away with. The evidence was airtight, and the terms? Let's just say they were far from fair. I was cornered, with nowhere to turn and no leg to stand on. Feeling like I'd hit rock bottom, I did what any desperate soul would do. I tried reaching out to Alex, hoping for, I don't even know what. Comfort? A do-over? But guess what? Alex had moved on, leaving me hanging in the wind. And those friends I thought I could fall back on? Turns out, betrayal has a domino effect. One by one, doors closed, faces turned away. My little escapade had alienated just about everyone who mattered. The divorce proceedings felt like a war zone, and I was outgunned and outmaneuvered at every turn. My husband's planning was meticulous, stripping me of financial security and any claim to our home. And just like that, my professional reputation took a nosedive alongside my personal life. Talk about a double whammy. So there I was, moving into this tiny, run-down apartment that felt miles away from the life I'd once taken for granted. The place was a constant, nagging reminder of every wrong turn I'd taken. Loneliness became my new best friend, a relentless companion in my downsized world. Then, out of the blue, I got this letter from my ex-husband. The first since our divorce had been finalized. He'd enclosed a photo of us from better days, with a note that hit harder than a punch to the gut. I loved you at your worst, but you couldn't do the same. That sentence echoed in my mind, a haunting reminder of what I'd thrown away. It was like waking up from a bad dream, only to realize the nightmare was my reality. My husband had moved on, finding happiness without me, while I was stuck in the rubble of the life I'd demolished. The full weight of my choices crashed down on me, leaving me to sift through the wreckage alone. Starting over wasn't just hard, it felt nearly impossible. I hit the job market again, trying to piece together a semblance of a career from the scraps left of my professional reputation. Making new friends, or even reconnecting with old ones, felt like climbing Everest in flip-flops. Every interaction was shadowed by the stigma of my past, every step forward a battle against the tide of judgment and mistrust. This chapter of my life was like navigating a minefield blindfolded. Each day brought its own set of challenges, a constant test of my resolve to rebuild from the ground up. The journey was grueling, a daily grind of facing consequences and trying to prove I was more than my mistakes. But with each small victory, each day I didn't give up, I started to see glimmers of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around. But damn, was it going to be an uphill battle? So, there I was, scrolling through my feed, when I stumbled upon something that felt like a punch to the gut. My ex-husband had remarried, and not just to anyone, but to a woman who used to be a mutual friend of ours. Seeing their happy pictures online, the love and trust shining in their eyes, it was like swallowing a bitter pill. Here I was, stuck in the same loop of regret and loneliness, while he had moved on and found happiness. Not long after that, fate decided to throw me another curveball. At a professional networking event, I bumped into Alex. Yeah, the same Alex. But the guy who stood in front of me was almost a stranger. Successful, confident, and, frankly, indifferent to our past. Our brief exchange was polite but distant, a clear sign that what we had meant nothing to him now. It was a wake-up call, showing me just how much I had deluded myself into thinking our affair had any real significance. Trying to get back into the dating scene was a nightmare of its own. Word gets around, and it seemed like my past was the only thing people could focus on. The label of the unfaithful wife clung to me like a shadow, turning potential connections into wary acquaintances. Each failed attempt was a reminder of the long-lasting consequences of my actions. And just when I thought things couldn't get any more ironic, I received an invitation to my ex-husband's wedding anniversary party. It was obviously a mistake, probably a remnant of a mailing list, but holding that envelope, I couldn't help but laugh at the cruel irony of it all. It was a tangible representation of the life I had thrown away, now forever out of reach. That was the moment I knew I needed to make a change. I couldn't keep living in this cycle of regret and self-pity. So, I took a step I never thought I would. I joined a self-help group for people struggling with the aftermath of their decisions. Walking into that first meeting was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Admitting my faults, exposing my vulnerabilities to a room full of strangers was humiliating, yet strangely liberating. It was in those meetings that I found a sense of solidarity. Listening to others share their stories, I realized I wasn't alone in my guilt and pain. The acknowledgement of the hurt we had caused, the acceptance of our mistakes, it was a shared burden. It was there, in the midst of shared stories and collective healing, that I began to truly understand the depth of the pain I had inflicted. Not just on my ex-husband, but on myself as well. This journey towards accountability wasn't easy. Each meeting, each story, peeled back layers of denial and self-deception I had clung to. But with each layer removed, I found a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. It was a slow, painful path to understanding and acceptance, but it was also the first time in a long time I felt like I was moving forward, not just running from my past. Guess what? Life has this funny way of kicking you in the butt when you least expect it, but sometimes, just sometimes, it's exactly what you need. So, after the whole world seemed to crumble beneath my feet, I found myself doing something I never thought I'd do. I started volunteering at a local charity. And man, was it a reality check. Here I was, used to chasing after the next shiny thing, and now I was getting down and dirty, helping those who really had it rough. Talk about a humbling experience. Fast forward a year after the divorce. I'm minding my own business, trying to keep it together, when I bump into one of my ex-husband's relatives. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. But they mentioned he was doing well, and something about hearing that just made everything feel so final. Like the last chapter of that book had been closed, and someone else was writing a new one without me. As the anniversary of the divorce rolled around, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. It had been one hell of a ride, full of ups and downs, mostly downs if I'm being honest. But facing the music, dealing with the mess I made, it forced me to grow up in ways I never imagined. So, in a burst of what some might call insanity, I started a blog. Yeah, me, the woman who could barely keep a journal, was now putting it all out there for the world to see. Writing about the affair, the divorce, the aftermath, it was like ripping off a band-aid. Painful, but somehow healing. I wanted to show others that they weren't alone and maybe, just maybe, prevent someone else from making the same mistakes I did. To my utter shock, people actually read it. And I mean, really read it. Suddenly, my little corner of the internet became this gathering place for shared stories and healing. Sure, there were haters, people who threw my past in my face, but there were also those who understood, who sympathized. It was like looking into a mirror and seeing all the fractured pieces trying to fit back together. Then, out of the blue, I got the chance to speak at a conference about personal growth and overcoming adversity. Standing there, in front of all those people, sharing my story, I felt naked. But as I spoke, something incredible happened. I felt stronger, empowered even. It was as if by sharing my journey, I was finally taking control of it. That speaking gig? It opened doors I didn't even know existed. Suddenly, I was getting offers to speak at other events, write articles, even consult on projects about personal responsibility and transformation. It was like I'd found my calling, helping others navigate through their storms. But here's the kicker. Despite all the professional success, the applause, the nods of approval, there was still this emptiness inside. Birthdays, holidays, they all came and went, each one a stark reminder of the family I once had, the love I'd squandered. The solitude was my shadow, always there, always reminding me that some losses are forever. In this weird, winding journey of mine, I've learned a thing or two. Most importantly, that life goes on, but it's what we do with those lessons, how we choose to grow and help others, that really counts. Sure, the void never fully disappears, but maybe, just maybe, it's not supposed to. Maybe it's there to remind us of what we've overcome and what we still have to offer. So, there I was, just another day in the life of me, trying to glue the pieces back together, when bam! I hear Alex is getting hitched. Yeah, the very same Alex who was once the center of my universe, now off to start a whole new galaxy with someone else. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Not because I wanted him back or anything, that ship sailed, hit an iceberg, and sank to the bottom of the ocean. But it was like the universe saying, hey, remember this chapter of your life? It's officially done. After that little reality check, I made a promise to myself, no more drama. I was done with the whole love game. Instead, I poured all that energy into me, working on being a better person, focusing on friendships that didn't come with a side of heartache. It was surprisingly refreshing, like hitting the reset button on my social life. Then, as if fate decided I'd had enough of a timeout, I bumped into an old friend from way back. We got to talking, and next thing I know, we're brainstorming this community project together. It was nothing glamorous, just something small and local, but man, did it feel good to be part of something positive again. Seeing our little project make a difference, even in a small way, gave me a kind of high I hadn't felt in ages. That success was a game changer for me. It wasn't just about the project, it was proof that I could start over, make something good out of the mess I'd made. I started feeling like I belonged again, not just in the community but to myself. I know, sounds cheesy, but there it is. One day, I took this long walk around the city, just me and my thoughts. I walked past places that used to be bookmarks in my story with Alex, but this time, they didn't hold the same power over me. It was like I was seeing my city, my life, with new eyes, eyes that were finally looking forward instead of back. That's when I decided to start mentoring. If there's one thing I've got, it's a cautionary tale or two to share. Working with young women who were facing their own crossroads felt right. It was tough opening up about my mistakes, but if my mess-ups could help someone else avoid the same pitfalls, then it was worth it. Meanwhile, on the home front, things were slowly getting better with my family. The affair and divorce had put us through the ringer, but we were finding our way back to each other. Those tentative steps towards reconciliation were healing in a way I didn't know I needed. It's funny how you don't realize how much you miss something until it starts to return to you, piece by piece. And then, there's Max. No, not a new man. I told you, I'm done with that drama. Max is my rescue dog. That furball came into my life with his wagging tail and slobbery kisses, and somehow, he filled up a lot of empty spaces. Taking care of him, knowing he needed me as much as I needed him, it brought a sense of purpose back into my life. So, here I am, navigating this new chapter. It's not what I thought my life would look like, but maybe, just maybe, it's exactly where I need to be. Life's got a funny way of throwing curveballs, but it's also full of second chances, you just gotta be brave enough to catch them. So, guess what? It's been 2 whole years since the divorce, feels like a lifetime and a blink all at once. I decided to throw this little get-together, nothing fancy, just a few friends who've been my rocks through this whole storm. It was amazing, you know? To look around the room and realize, despite everything, I wasn't alone. These folks, they saw me at my absolute worst, and here they were, still. It hit me hard, the power of real, unwavering friendship and maybe, just maybe, a bit of forgiveness too. Around the same time, I landed this new job. All that speaking and writing about personal growth and overcoming adversity? It turned into something tangible, something that actually pays the bills. The work's tough but fulfilling, pushing me to grow in ways I hadn't even thought possible. It's like I'm finally stepping out from the shadow of my past, crafting a new identity on my terms. Feels pretty darn good, to be honest. Then, one day, doing a bit of much-needed spring cleaning, I found this letter I'd written to my husband back when our world was crumbling. Reading it now, with all this time and distance, was like watching a movie of someone else's life. The regret, the apologies I never made, it was all there in black and white. A stark reminder of the hurt I caused, not just to him, but to myself. That letter, it spurred something in me. I needed to get away, find some clarity. So, I took off on this solo trip. Just me, my thoughts, and a whole lot of road. It was scary, liberating, and utterly necessary. Being alone with myself, without the noise of my past mistakes drowning out my thoughts, I started to piece together who I am now, who I want to be. Coming back from that trip, something had shifted. The community around me, they began to see the changes too. It wasn't like everyone suddenly forgot what happened, but there was this sense of acceptance, a recognition of the person I was becoming. It was subtle, but it was there, and it meant everything. I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I wrote a letter to my ex-husband. Not asking for forgiveness, but thanking him. For the good times, for the lessons learned in the wake of our shared disaster. It was my way of letting go, of putting to rest the last of the ghosts that haunted me. And now, here I am, sitting in my apartment on a chilly December evening, reflecting on this crazy journey. The silence around me isn't so daunting anymore. It's a canvas, waiting for new stories to be painted. I've lost a lot along the way. A marriage, friends, a version of myself I can never get back. But I've gained so much too, strength, wisdom, a sense of purpose. It's been a rough road, filled with mistakes and lessons, but it's my road, and I'm the one steering. The truth is, chasing after what I thought I wanted, it cost me everything. But in the ashes of that old life, I found the seeds of something new. It's not going to be easy, rebuilding from here, but for the first time in a long time, I feel ready. Ready to face whatever comes next, to embrace the uncertainty and the potential for something beautiful. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that actions have consequences, but they also lead to paths of redemption. And that path, rocky and steep though it may be, it's mine to walk. Here's to the journey ahead, wherever it. The office party was the same old scene, stale canopies and half-hearted conversations about spreadsheets. That was until I saw him, a spark of green eyes and a smirk that lit up the dim room. It was Steve, my husband's best friend. We'd always gotten along, but there was an energy in the air that night, something different. Bored out of your mind? He asked, sliding next to me at the makeshift bar. Before I could answer, I was already smiling, a genuine smile I hadn't felt in a while. Turns out, ditching work talk for inside jokes and playful banter was way more fun than I realized. We laughed about my workaholic husband, and, yeah, maybe the wine helped my fingers linger a bit too long when he touched my arm. Walking home, that familiar pang of guilt hit me. I always felt a little bad when I craved a spark that my marriage sometimes lacked. Still, that buzz under my skin wouldn't fade away. It wasn't helped by the unexpected ping on my phone. Steve, sending a funny photo from the party. My reply was way too quick, way too flirty. I snuck into bed beside my husband, already snoring softly. He wouldn't have noticed my barely suppressed excitement, but the truth was, I didn't want him to. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Hiding that smile was harder than it should have been, and even harder to ignore the thrill of starting a dangerous game. I wasn't stupid, I knew better, but suddenly work wasn't the same. It was like everyone knew, the air thick with unspoken tension. Even Ben, the awkward guy from accounting, kept giving me these weird looks. Was I imagining things, or was there something hungry behind that stare? The office break room was never my favorite place, but lately, it felt downright hostile. Whispered conversations cut short the moment I walked in. A pointed look between Ben and Steve set off alarm bells. Did they know? Know what, exactly, I wasn't sure, but that knot of guilt and fear was squeezing tighter in my chest. It started as a harmless excuse, just needing coffee during that afternoon slump. Then it became a routine. A daily escape with Ben to the dingy cafe down the street. The conversations weren't about spreadsheets anymore. We were venting frustrations about work, about our lives, about the dullness seeping into our marriages. It felt thrilling, daunting, and dangerous. One day, his hand lingered on mine as we crossed the street, a jolt running up my arm. It was a silent dare, and the thrill of it mixed with a sickening dose of guilt. He knew how I felt, how desperately I craved that spark I could no longer find at home. The new perfume was a stupid mistake. Too sweet, too floral, not at all my usual style. Yet there it was, clinging to my clothes, a dead giveaway to anyone paying attention. I held my breath when my husband brushed by, but he didn't seem to notice. The relief was quickly swallowed by self-disgust. One evening, I was closing up a report alone at the office. A flicker of movement outside my door had me jumping. Then I saw it. A glint of light reflecting off something metallic in the hallway. It took a few heartbeats too many to realize, a camera. Were they watching? My breath hitched. It was all just harmless flirting, right? Nothing serious enough to warrant surveillance. Panic flared, then cold calculation. Every lingering text, every stolen glance suddenly seemed like evidence. With trembling hands, I deleted messages, cleared call logs, and started spinning every excuse imaginable. My head spun. Had I been this reckless? Was the game over before it even began? I should have ended it, cut Ben off completely after that handhold. But every time I resolved to act normal, his eyes would find mine across the office, a mix of accusation and longing. It messed with my head, kept me off balance, unsure if he was going to expose me or tempt me further. That's when the first text came. No name, just a chilling message. I see what you're doing. My blood ran cold. Was it Steve, Ben, some jealous coworker, or, in the darkest corner of my mind, my husband? Suddenly, everyone was a suspect. Every sideways glance in the office felt heavy with meaning. I started jumping at shadows, imagining whispers behind closed doors. Was my husband playing dumb, carefully setting a trap? I spent hours analyzing his every move, every word, looking for the slightest change. I couldn't take it anymore. I cornered Steve at the dingy bar we always went to after work. Is this your idea of a joke? I hissed, shoving my phone in his face. His smile was stiff, his eyes denying everything, but the flicker of unease was unmistakable. Going home that night, I felt more like a prisoner than a wife. Even the familiar click of the front door lock sent shivers down my spine. I forced myself to smile as my husband walked in, acting like everything was perfect. Dinner was agony. I chattered too much, laughed too loud, and tried desperately to ignore the way he watched me, a strange glint in his eyes. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, made me bolt upright. My own home had become a haunted house, each echoing corner filled with the whispered accusations of my own guilty conscience. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure who I was afraid of anymore, Steve, Ben, my husband, or myself. One more day in that office and I thought I might actually scream. The whispers seemed louder, the stares more intense. I couldn't take it, I needed an out. Any out. My fingers were already dialing in sick before my brain could process what I was doing. Then the suitcase was open, clothes flung haphazardly inside. Just a few days away to clear my head, that was the lie I told myself. That lie carried me to a nondescript hotel on the edge of the city, far from any place I knew. The anonymity should have been comforting, but my reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror only made me recoil. Who was this desperate, paranoid woman staring back at me? I should have stayed locked inside, but a gnawing restlessness drove me out. That's how I found myself in the cramped coffee shop, sipping bitter coffee and trying to disappear into a trashy romance novel. That's when I saw him, Ben. My heart lurched. Was this a coincidence, or something far more sinister? Our eyes met, and any thought of escape went out the window. It was like all that fear and tension twisted into a desperate need. We ended up in one of those cheap motels on the edge of town, the kind with curtains that never fully close. There, amidst the stained sheets and flickering neon sign, all my inhibitions vanished. We confessed everything, our miserable marriages, the spark we'd both been missing, the thrill of something so reckless. A boundary wasn't just crossed, it was obliterated. His hands were on me, and for those stolen hours, the guilt, the fear, they melted away. It all came crashing down when I saw her, a woman from Ben's office, staring at us with wide, horrified eyes. In that split second, everything changed. I bolted out of the room, Ben scrambling behind me. Out on the street, every face looked accusatory, every car seemed ready to follow. I never went back to the office, never went home. That reckless weekend turned into a blur of anonymous towns and sleepless nights on grimy bus seats. The thrilling escape had become a nightmare, and there was no turning back. The phantom buzz became my constant companion. Every ring jangled my nerves, every unread text filled me with dread. The messages were twisted games, cryptic riddles, ominous warnings, a promise that I wasn't safe anywhere. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure who my tormentor was anymore. Going home was a calculated risk. My husband was there, his hurt masked by a stony silence that was worse than any shouting. He didn't have to ask, he knew something was terribly wrong. His eyes followed me as I moved through the rooms, a predator assessing injured prey. The lies were getting harder to keep straight. Every stumble, every slip of the tongue, tightened the suspicion in his eyes. We circled each other like wary animals, the once comfortable silence now crackling with unspoken accusations. Sleep became the enemy, nightmares jolted me awake, sweat-soaked and trembling. Then came the obsessive search. I tore the house apart, convinced hidden cameras were still lurking. Floorboards were pried up, air vents examined with a flashlight. The more I searched, the crazier I must have looked even to myself. Everyone was a suspect, Steve, for starting this mess. Ben, who either betrayed me or was in on some sick game. I even began questioning coworkers, analyzing past slights and petty office squabbles with frantic paranoia. The worst part was the isolation. I couldn't confide in anyone, not with this toxic mix of shame and fear swirling inside me. Old friends' messages went unanswered, their concerned voices felt like a world away. The silence of the house became deafening. I started talking to myself, whispering arguments and accusations against the unseen watchers. My reflection in the mirror was a stranger, gaunt, wild-eyed, a ghost of the carefree woman I barely remembered. This was my prison, a twisted punishment for sins I barely understood. How would it end? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The unraveling was happening too fast. One minute I was scrambling to hide my mistakes, the next my entire world was about to implode. I needed to get ahead of this, seize control, or risk becoming a helpless victim of my own panicked undoing. In the shadowy world of parking garage handoffs and cash payments, I found him, the private investigator. A scruffy man with sharp eyes and a promise he could get answers. It felt like handing my fate to a viper, but desperation always trumps good sense. The next few weeks were a blur. I became my own obsessive stalker, my phone filled with blurry photos of Ben leaving his apartment, of Steve meeting with people I didn't recognize. I even followed my own husband, a sickening knot in my stomach as I observed his painfully mundane routine. The PI's updates were cryptic, whispers of financial dealings gone wrong, a disgruntled competitor, overheard conversations. It was a puzzle with too many pieces, creating a picture that made no sense. It was all wrong. This was supposed to be about misplaced flirtations and petty revenge, wasn't it? Then came the text, from the most unexpected of sources. Sarah, the mousy girl in accounting who'd always kept her head down. I know what they're doing, the message read, it's not what you think. We need to talk. Meeting her in a dingy cafe near the office felt like a scene from a bad spy movie. Turns out, quiet Sarah had eyes everywhere. Office gossip wasn't just about who was sleeping with who, it was about financial schemes, hidden partnerships, and grudges far older and more dangerous than I'd ever imagined. Bit by bit, the truth began to leak out. It wasn't about me, not really. I was just the perfect pawn, a disgruntled wife in a disintegrating marriage, easy to manipulate and exploit. They wanted to destroy my husband, to ruin his business, and I had blithely walked right into their trap. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was the final, cruel twist. My own reckless desires had made me an accomplice to my own downfall. A strange sort of calmness washed over me once the sickening truth became clear. I wasn't just a victim. I was a weapon, expertly wielded against my own life. That realization sparked something cold and calculating inside me. It was time to turn the tables on this twisted game. With meticulous care, I crafted the bait. A carefully worded text, a hint about meeting with my blackmailer to pay them off. Just a touch of desperation, of a woman terrified and broken, but willing to do anything to keep her secrets safe. Of course, I knew there was no blackmailer, only my puppet masters. My performance in front of my husband deserved an Oscar. Tears, choked sobs, a crumbling facade of helpless terror. He might have seen through the act before, but this time he was blinded by something else, a primal, protective fury. Every word I uttered was designed to stoke that anger, to present myself as a victim manipulated by an unseen predator. His reaction was chillingly predictable. He was ready for a fight. The secluded spot I'd chosen, an abandoned warehouse overlooking the city, wasn't for a rendezvous with a blackmailer. It was an ambush. My husband, fueled by blind rage, lay in wait. When the figure finally emerged from the shadows, my gasp of fear was genuine. It wasn't some unknown enemy, but Steve, his eyes glittering with a mix of triumph and a warped, obsessive hunger. For a heart-stopping second, I thought the plan had backfired. Then my husband stepped out, the confrontation inevitable. The accusations, the denials. It was almost a distraction from the true horror blooming in my own chest. Steve had never just wanted to expose a cheater. His desire was far deeper, far more twisted. He wanted to possess, to claim everything my husband had for his own. And I'd been his weapon of choice. The warehouse floor was slick with rainwater, reflecting the flashing blue and red of police lights. Steve was gone, hauled away babbling some half-baked excuse I couldn't even stomach. My husband stood over me, his face a mask of shock and barely contained violence. Yet, the adrenaline buzz in my own veins had faded, leaving a chilling numbness in its place. The aftermath was mechanical, police statements, sympathetic detectives who didn't understand the depth of the betrayal, and the inevitable media frenzy that descended like vultures the moment my husband's name was connected to the story. The house that had once felt like a prison was now a tomb. Every object, every piece of furniture, held the sticky residue of deceit. My husband's apologies felt perfunctory, like he was going through the motions of a heartbroken spouse. Maybe he was, but the hollowness in his eyes mirrored my own. It wasn't even Steve's face that haunted my nightmares. It was my reflection, staring back with accusing eyes. How could I have been so blind, so willing to sacrifice everything for that pathetic spark of attention? The guilt wasn't just for my betrayal, but for my stupidity, my willingness to be used. Everyone had advice, of course. Well-meaning friends whispered phrases about resilience and forgiveness, their voices fading into white noise against the roar of despair in my head. There were lawyers, too, cold, emotionless sharks discussing division of assets as if they were carving up a carcass. I signed papers, numbly agreeing to terms I barely understood. Sleep became a torture chamber. Each night brought a relentless replay of the past months spiraling into disaster. I'd jolt awake, heart pounding, certain Steve was lurking in the shadows, when in reality it was the shadow of my own destructive choices that loomed over my life. They say time heals all wounds. Maybe it does, eventually. But in those first weeks and months of picking up the shattered fragments of my life, there was no healing, only a relentless ache of regret, a hollowness carved deep into my soul. The plane ticket was booked before I could even analyze what I was doing. Some remote Caribbean island with cheap drinks and blindingly wide beaches. That's where my finger landed on the blurry map. It didn't matter, anywhere felt better than suffocating in the wreckage of my own damn life. The first few days were a blur of forced relaxation. I lay on the burning sand, letting guilt and exhaustion wash over me in waves, just as the tide erased my footprints. Yet, strangely, the anonymity of the sunburned tourists and overworked bartenders was a balm to my raw spirit. I wasn't the cheating wife, the ruined woman, I was just another body with a bad sunburn and a half-finished margarita. Alone on my tiny hotel balcony, the stars shockingly bright in the island sky, I found myself drawn into conversations I never would have sought out at home. The old German woman who recounted her life as an escapee, the young backpacker with dreams bigger than his budget, the local bartender who saw every kind of heartbreak play out on his worn wooden counter. An internal battle raged. Was this cowardly, escaping my problems instead of facing them head-on? Yet, with each story I heard, each fleeting connection formed over cheap rum, a tiny spark of something flickered within me. Was it hope, or just the desperate delusion of the self-destructive? The news from home trickled in like a bad signal on a fading radio. Texts filled with legalese about the divorce, an email notification that the house had sold. With each update, it was like the ghost of my old life was finally being exorcised, painfully but necessarily. Then came the call I didn't expect. It was Sarah, the quiet girl from accounting, the one person who saw through the mess and offered, not judgment, but a lifeline. "We need you back," she said, "not to the office, not to all of that, but there's this project, Women Helping Women, and I thought of you." The offer dangled in the air, an escape hatch, but one that led into the unknown. It wasn't about a husband anymore, or a job, or any external definition of who I was supposed to be. The only question left was terrifyingly simple. What the hell was I going to do with the rest of my life? The return flight was booked, but there would be no grand reunions, no tearful recriminations. A tiny apartment with just enough room for me. A job that was barely a job, more like a step into a vast and terrifying new world. It wasn't a solution, it was barely a start. Yet, standing on the cracked concrete of my balcony, a pot of scraggly flowers my sole possession, something shifted inside me. The ending of this story was unwritten, and for the first time in a long, long time, it felt like I was the one holding. The cold was biting that December evening, the kind that seeps into your bones, but it wasn't just the chill in the air that had me shivering. It was the frost in my marriage, the growing ice between me and my husband, Jack. His late nights at the office had become the norm, but something felt off. I told myself it was just the stress of his job, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. One night, as I was hanging up his coat, a second phone tumbled out. Not his usual one. This one was sleek, new, and when I powered it up, it was like opening Pandora's box. Messages from a woman named Eva, filled with heart emojis and plans for secret rendezvous. My heart sank. Infidelity wasn't just a suspicion anymore, it was a reality staring me in the face. I confronted Jack the next morning, coffee in hand, accusations ready. But he brushed it off, called me paranoid, said I was imagining things. The nerve of him, treating me like I was the one losing my grip on reality. I wasn't about to let this slide. I vowed to myself right then and there I'd uncover the truth, no matter what it took. So, I turned into a detective of sorts. Following him was easier than I thought. One night, I trailed his car from a distance, my heart pounding with every turn. And there it was, the luxurious hotel, the kind we used to stay at when love felt like a perpetual honeymoon. I saw them together, Jack and Eva, laughing, touching, in a world of their own. It felt like a punch to the gut, every laugh a stab, every touch a betrayal. Devastated, I reached out to the only person I knew would understand my old flame, Alex. He'd been my first love, the one who got away. Pouring my heart out to Alex, I found comfort in the familiarity, the shared history. And as we talked, a plan began to form in my mind. If Jack wanted to play games, I'd show him I could play too. With Alex's help, I began an affair of my own. Every secret meeting, every stolen kiss, I documented meticulously. It felt wrong, yet exhilarating. I was no longer the victim. I was reclaiming my power, one clandestine photo at a time. And then, the package. A collection of photos, our secret moments, sent anonymously to Jack. I imagined his shock, his anger, the taste of his own medicine. It was petty, revenge-driven, and yet, it gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. I wanted him to feel the burn of jealousy, to understand the pain he'd inflicted. That chapter of my life, that cold December, marked the beginning of a tumultuous journey. It was filled with actions driven by hurt, decisions clouded by betrayal. Looking back, I can't say I'm proud of everything I did, but in those moments, they felt like the only way to survive the storm. The moment I flipped open that unassuming brown package and saw those photos, my heart plummeted into my stomach. Pictures of me and Mark, my old flame, caught in the middle of our secret rendezvous. It was my own doing, my attempt to jab back at Tom, my husband, for what I thought was his betrayal. But when Tom stormed into the room, his face twisted with anger and betrayal, I knew I'd ignited a firestorm I wasn't prepared for. "You," Tom's voice was a low growl, disbelief and rage warring in his eyes. "Of all the, how could you?" I stood frozen, the photos now a heap of confessions on the floor between us. My mind raced, searching for words that could undo the hurt, but there were none. "Tom," I thought. "You thought what? That I was cheating?" He cut me off, his laugh bitter. "God, Sarah, how did we get here?" The room felt suffocating as the truth hung heavily between us. That's when Tom dropped the bombshell. "I was working undercover, Sarah. All those late nights, the texts. It was all to expose a corruption ring at work. I wasn't unfaithful." My world stopped. The floor might as well have opened up and swallowed me whole. The guilt, the shame, it all hit me like a freight train. "Tom, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." But sorry wasn't enough. Not for the distance I'd put between us, not for the lies. I decided then and there to end things with Mark, to try and salvage what was left of my marriage. Mark, however, didn't take the news as I'd hoped. "You can't just walk away, Sarah," he'd said, his voice cold, threatening. "I won't let you." I returned to Tom, laying my heart and my apologies at his feet. "I want to make this right," I pleaded. But the damage was done. "I need some space, Sarah." "Time to think," was all Tom could offer. His words felt like a punch to the gut, leaving me reeling. Determined to win back his trust, I planned a grand romantic gesture, something to show Tom the depth of my love and regret. But Mark was always there, lurking in the shadows, his obsession growing darker. It all came to a head one evening. I'd planned a surprise dinner for Tom, hoping it would be the first step toward reconciliation. But Mark showed up instead, fury in his eyes. "If I can't have you, no one can," he spat, lunging at Tom. The fight was brutal. Tom, caught off guard, took the brunt of Mark's rage. By the time I managed to pull Mark off, Tom was lying on the ground, bloodied and unconscious. My heart shattered as I dialed 911, my hands shaking uncontrollably. As the ambulance whisked Tom away, the police arrived to deal with Mark. I sat on the curb, my mind numb, replaying the events over and over. How had my attempt to salvage my marriage ended in violence and despair? That night, as I waited in the hospital, the weight of my actions bore down on me. I'd set this catastrophe in motion, all because I couldn't trust the man I loved. The road to forgiveness seemed insurmountable, but I knew I had to try. For Tom, for us. But as I watched him lying there, so still, so hurt, I couldn't help but wonder if some mistakes were just too big to forgive. The air was thick with tension, the kind that you could cut with a knife and still feel it clinging to your skin. There I was, outside the hospital room, my heart pounding like a jackhammer against my chest, dreading the sight I was about to see. My husband, the man I vowed to spend my life with, lay on the other side of that door, battered and bruised because of a whirlwind I had set in motion. I pushed the door open, the creak sounding more like a scream in the silent hallway. There he was, looking so small and vulnerable amidst the beeping machines and tangled four lines. My legs moved on their own, carrying me to his bedside. I took his hand, barely recognizing the man whose laughter once filled our home. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, the words a meager attempt to bridge the chasm my actions had created. Days turned into nights, and nights back into days, with me barely leaving his side. I watched for any sign of improvement, any indication that he would wake up and forgive me for the chaos I'd caused. And then, miraculously, he did. His eyes fluttered open, meeting mine with a mixture of pain and understanding. "I forgive you," he murmured, but the words were a double-edged sword. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting, and the scars we both bore were testament to that. Realization dawned on me like a harsh winter's day. Our love, once unbreakable, now lay in fragments, too sharp to piece back together. In a desperate bid to salvage what remained, I made the hardest decision of my life. I sold everything, every piece of jewelry, every luxury we had indulged in, all in an effort to pay off the medical bills and start afresh. But money couldn't buy back trust, nor could it rewind time. The day he was discharged from the hospital marked the end of our life together. He had accepted a job in another city, a clean slate far away from the wreckage of us. "I need to do this," he said, and I understood. Our last embrace was a goodbye to everything we had dreamt of, a silent acknowledgement of the love we once shared. Left alone in the shell of our home, I clung to the hope that time would heal our wounds. But that hope was shattered when I received a message from him. Not my husband, but the other man, the one who had promised me revenge but delivered only destruction. A photo of us together, his arm around me, with a chilling note, "You'll never escape us." Fear gripped me, a constant companion in the empty nights. My affair had not only cost me my marriage but now threatened my very safety. His obsession, once flattering, now felt like a noose tightening around my neck. I was a prisoner of my own making, trapped by decisions that haunted me at every turn. I had embarked on a path of revenge, seeking to wound my husband for a perceived betrayal, only to find myself ensnared in a web of lies and danger. My lover's threats loomed over me, a dark cloud promising a storm that I had no shelter from. The realization hit me hard, a cruel twist in a tale of my own design. My quest for vengeance had led me here, to a place of isolation and fear, far removed from the love and safety I once knew. In the deafening silence of my empty house, I faced the grim truth of my actions. The price of my revenge was everything I held dear, and the cost of my freedom, it seemed, was yet to be fully paid. The moment I stepped into the police station, my heart was racing, but not from the cold. "I need to report someone," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The officer looked up, his face a mask of professionalism. I spilled everything, about the affair, the threats, the fear that clung to me like a second skin. But when they checked his alibi, it was rock solid. He was miles away that night, they told me, their words a cold comfort that left me feeling more alone than ever. I couldn't stay in the city, not with the way shadows seemed to whisper his name, not with the way my heart jumped at every unexpected sound. "I'm leaving," I told my reflection, the woman in the mirror a stranger with haunted eyes. Packing was a silent affair, each item a reminder of a life that was slipping through my fingers. The night before I was set to leave, I found it. Vandalism. A word too mild for the destruction that greeted me at my doorstep. There's no escape. The spray-painted message on my wall screamed. My hands trembled as I traced the letters, a sinister promise made real. Then came the tip, an anonymous note slid under my door. Warehouse at the docks, midnight. See for yourself. It was madness, the kind of plot twist you'd roll your eyes at in a movie. And yet, desperation has a way of making the insane seem logical. I went. The warehouse loomed in the darkness, a behemoth of rust and shadows. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of danger. Hiding in the shadows, I watched as my lover and a figure I recognized from the news as a notorious criminal exchanged briefcases. The reality of his world, a world I had unknowingly become a part of, unfolded before me. My phone, a silent witness in my trembling hands, captured every moment. This was it, the evidence that would sever the ties that bound me to him, the chains of fear and manipulation. But as I turned to leave, a noise betrayed my presence. The chase was something out of a nightmare, my breath sharp in my ears, my legs pushing past the limit of exhaustion. I could hear them behind me, their footsteps a constant reminder of the danger I was in. Ducking and weaving through the maze of crates and machinery, I made my escape, a mix of luck and sheer willpower. Panting, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest, I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of my car. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing faster than the vehicle. The recording on my phone was more than just evidence, it was my ticket to a new life, free from the shadows of his threats. But as the city lights faded in my rearview mirror, a chilling thought took hold. This was far from over. My decision to confront the danger head-on had changed the game. I was no longer just a pawn in his twisted world, I was now a player. And in this game, the stakes were life or death. The moment I stepped into the police station, clutching the evidence that felt heavier than lead in my digital grasp, I knew there was no turning back. I have something you need to see, I said, my voice a mix of determination and fear. The officers, skeptical at first, were soon glued to the screen of my phone, their expressions turning from doubt to shock as the video played. The arrest of my lover and the subsequent unraveling of his criminal operations were swift. Watching him being led away in handcuffs, I felt a complex cocktail of emotions. Relief, certainly, but also a profound sense of isolation. My actions had brought down a dangerous man, yet the cost was more than I had anticipated. The community's reaction was swift and unforgiving. Whispers followed me in the streets, eyes that once greeted me with warmth now looked through me with cold judgment. I had become an outcast, blamed for not only my infidelity but the chaos that ensued. The irony wasn't lost on me, the very people who had once envied my seemingly perfect life now shunned me for its unraveling. In the midst of this storm, I found a sliver of purpose. I started a support group, a haven for those who, like me, found themselves ensnared in cycles of abuse and betrayal. "You're not alone" became our mantra, a beacon of hope in the darkness that had enveloped my life. One day, a letter arrived, its handwriting painfully familiar. My husband, the man whose love I had betrayed and whose forgiveness I had sought in vain, wrote not with bitterness but with a wish for my happiness. "I hope you find peace," he wrote, closing a chapter of our lives that had ended not with a bang but with a whisper of acceptance. Dedicating myself to helping others became my salvation. The support group grew, stories of pain and resilience weaving a tapestry of shared human experience. Recognition for our efforts came, not in the form of awards or accolades, but in the quiet thanks of those we helped, a currency far more valuable than any I had known. Yet, with each story of heartbreak and healing, the weight of my own past actions pressed heavily on me. Loneliness became a constant companion, a reminder of the cost of my choices. The news of my husband's remarriage reached me not with malice but as a matter of fact, a punctuation mark on a sentence that had already been written. Finding happiness elsewhere, he had moved on, leaving me to navigate the aftermath of our shared history alone. The news brought a sense of closure, bittersweet and laced with regrets. Yet, it also underscored a truth I had come to understand. Happiness was not something to be found in the arms of another, but something to be built, piece by piece, through actions and intent. In the solitude of my new life, I found strength in the community we had created, a group of souls mending each other's wings so we might all fly again. My journey from the depths of betrayal to the pursuit of redemption was not just my story but a shared narrative of loss, resilience, and the indomitable spirit of the human heart. The night air was charged, a storm brewing in the distance as if mirroring the turmoil within me. The support group I had started, once a small gathering, had blossomed into a sanctuary for the broken, a beacon of hope in the darkness of their lives. Yet, amidst this success, the ghosts of my past danced in the shadows, unrelenting in their pursuit. It was on one such stormy evening that the specter of my past reared its ugly head once more. A note slipped under my door, its message clear and menacing. You can't hide from what you've started. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the intent behind the words was as clear as daylight. My lover's associates, it seemed, were not content with his incarceration. They sought revenge, and I was their target. Fear, a constant shadow since that fateful night at the warehouse, tightened its grip on me. I fortified my home, installing security cameras and changing locks, a fortress against the threats that lurked outside. The support center, too, became a bastion of safety, or so I hoped. Yet, fear is not easily assuaged by bolts and barriers. The illusion of security shattered when the support center was broken into. Nothing was taken, but the message was unmistakable. We were vulnerable, exposed to the whims of those seeking retribution for sins not theirs to atone. The break-in served as a chilling reminder of the danger that stalked me, a shadow that loomed over not just me but those I had vowed to protect. Confronting the reality of my situation, I realized the web of consequences my actions had spun was far-reaching, ensnaring innocent bystanders in its intricate threads. The weight of this realization was a burden, heavy with the knowledge that my quest for revenge had endangered more than just my own life. In a moment of clarity, amidst the chaos that had become my existence, I made a decision. If my story could serve as a cautionary tale, then perhaps the pain, the fear, and the loss would not have been in vain. I stepped into the public eye. My story laid bare for the world to see, a testament to the destructive power of revenge and the redemptive strength of forgiveness. The reaction was immediate and far-reaching. My story, once whispered in hushed tones, now sparked a nationwide conversation. Opinions were divided, with some lauding my bravery and others condemning my actions. Support poured in from unexpected quarters, while criticism sharpened the blades of my detractors. Yet, amidst the cacophony of voices, a singular truth emerged. The cycle of violence, once set into motion, is a force both devastating and unyielding. As the storm outside raged, mirroring the tempest of public opinion, I found solace in the knowledge that my story, however fraught with mistakes and missteps, had ignited a dialogue. A dialogue about the shadows that infidelity casts, the poison of revenge, and the possibility of forgiveness. In sharing my journey, I had unwittingly become a catalyst for change, a voice for those ensnared in their own battles, fighting demons in the darkness. The path I had walked was fraught with pain and loss, a journey through the darkest corners of the human heart. Yet, in the end, it was also a journey towards understanding, a beacon of hope for those lost in the night. My story, once the tale of betrayal and revenge, had become a narrative of resilience and redemption, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, there is light to be found. Just when I thought the storm had passed, life threw me another curveball. It came out of nowhere, an email buried among the junk in my inbox, marked urgent. I can help you, it read, signed by someone who called themselves a friend. Skepticism was my first reaction. Help, in my experience, always came with a price. Yet, desperation has a way of making you grasp at straws, and grasp I did. This mysterious benefactor wasn't just blowing smoke. They provided details, names, places, things that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was like being handed a map to a treasure trove, except this treasure was a network of people, each affected by my lover's criminal web. My resolve strengthened. This was my chance to make things right, to use my ordeal for a greater good. Diving into this network was like opening Pandora's box. The deeper I went, the darker the secrets I unearthed. My lover's criminal activities were just the tip of the iceberg, linked to a larger network of crime and corruption that spread like a cancer through the city's underbelly. The realization was chilling, and yet, it ignited a fire within me. I was determined to expose them, armed with the evidence that had begun to pile up. The night before I was set to go public with my findings, disaster struck. My home, my sanctuary, was engulfed in flames. It was no accident. The fire was a message, a clear and terrifying attempt to silence me. I watched from the street, heart pounding, as the life I had rebuilt from the ashes of my past went up in smoke. The evidence, the documents, the recordings, all of it was consumed by the fire. Escaping the blaze was a miracle in itself, but the aftermath was devastating. Standing amidst the charred remains of my home, I was overcome by a sense of loss so profound it was almost paralyzing. The quest for revenge that had consumed me, the fight for justice that I had clung to, it had all led to this moment of utter desolation. My safety, my reputation, my heart, shattered beyond repair. Yet, as I stood there, surrounded by the ruins of my once peaceful life, a resolve took root deep within me. I had survived the fire, both literally and metaphorically, and though the flames had taken everything, they could not take my spirit. It was a painful epiphany, the realization that my quest for revenge had been my undoing. But from the ashes of my life, a new determination emerged. I vowed to rebuild, not for revenge, but for redemption. The path forward was unclear, fraught with challenges and uncertainties. Yet, I knew that some losses were irreplaceable, some scars too deep to ever fully heal. But in that moment of clarity, amidst the devastation of my own making, I found a glimmer of hope. A chance to start anew, to forge a future defined not by the mistakes of my past but by the lessons they had taught me. The journey ahead would be long and undoubtedly filled with obstacles, but I was ready to face them. Ready to use my experiences to help others, to fight not for vengeance, but for a cause greater than myself. The road to redemption was paved with hard truths and harder choices, but it was a road I was determined to walk. For in the end, it was not about what I had lost, but what I had found. A purpose, a cause, and perhaps, a chance